Hello, it's Friday. Cobus van Wijk is coming to the Premiership, but he's been dropped by the Hurricanes. And this is the Ruck and More podcast. I'm joined by Joe and Harry this week. Classic Friday. It's Johnny Sheldrake's probably too busy with work. Interesting haircuts going on, lads. Harry Barron's getting his haircut today.
Yeah, no, in 3 hours, it's all going.
Have you got your mask ready?
I have. It's not actually within visible sight, but yeah, all ready.
All ready to go. How are you getting on, Tricky? You all right?
Yeah, all good, mate. Needed that haircut a few weeks ago. Feeling a bit fresher now. But yeah.
Mine's a little bit ropey. There you go. For those that are viewing this on YouTube. Yeah, not too bad. I'll keep my hat off, actually. Right, so this is our weekly preview podcast, previewing this weekend's games of Super Rugby Aotearoa and Super Rugby AU. First up, we've got the Crusaders versus the Hurricanes. Last time these two teams met in round 2, the Crusaders claimed a comfortable 39-25 victory up in Wellington. A couple of injury concerns though for the Crusaders as vice-captain David Havili's been ruled out for the rest of the competition with a thumb injury. I believe he's broken his thumb. Ethan Blackadder's got a knee injury, and so he's out for the rest of the season. Also, unfortunately, Brendan Enor, who's having a relatively good competition, is out with a toe injury. So that could be a particular issue with Fetua Paya coming in for Enor, who I'll talk about probably in a moment. It's an unchanged 4-pack that beat the Blues. Obviously, Will Jordan's coming at fullback for David Havili. Lester Funganuku's come onto the bench with replacement fly half Brett Cameron on the bench. Let's sort of talk about the Crusaders then. How are these injuries going to affect them? Obviously, Havili's now out. Jordan, we obviously wanted back at 15. That's going to have an impact, especially with the Hurricanes on a 3-match winning streak.
I think the quality there is still very high. We said before that Will Jordan shouldn't really have been dropped and has been playing really, really well. Now he's got the opportunity to really kind of stamp his mark on that position and make that 15 shirt his for the foreseeable future. So certainly in that position, that's not really a step down in quality. That's the thing with Crusaders is that when you look at their bench and you look at the players they can bring on, they've still got a really high level of quality. So I think they'll be absolutely fine and they have looked really comfortable. It'll be a great match against the Hurricanes. They've looked solid in recent weeks too. So it'll be a great match. It'll be close, but I think the Crusaders will continue to dominate.
Harry, anything on the Crusaders for the Hurricanes?
No, completely agree. I think the Crusaders are looking like a strong team, even with a few rotations. I think Fetuli Paea, we've not seen a huge amount of him in Super Rugby yet, but I think he's got a few caps for the Tongan 15s and 7s teams and was a key part of that Tasman Mako's team who won the Mitre 10 last year. Good number of, looking on his rugby pass stats page, good number of line breaks, defenders beaten and try assists. So he's clearly a pretty explosive player. Not really surprising, given that he's been brought into the Crusaders starting lineup. But yeah, I think he's a good one to watch. Maybe a future fantasy steal. Always hard to get point scorers out of the midfield. So
yeah, as I say, like this is his first competition in Super Rugby. This is his third cap, it's a third start. He predominantly plays, as you said, outside centre. He can play on the wing as well. So yeah, 25 years old, still young, same age as us. Like, puts in perspective, he's a big boy as well. He's a big lad. So yeah, he'll need to have a crucial game. Obviously, he's up against Peter Munger Jensen, who we'll talk about in a moment. But yeah, it should be interesting to see how they get on. The Canes then, so Dane Coles is out with a back injury, so the inform Afoso Amoa comes in, but otherwise it's an unchanged 4-pack that beats the Blues last week. The changes come in as Wes Goosen comes in for Cobus van Wijk, and then Vince Arso and Chase Tier are back on the bench. Right, let's start with Cobus van Wijk, really. I wanted to talk about Leicester's signings on Sunday's podcast, because they've obviously made quite a few signings, and they've also signed Veltzer from the Stormers yesterday. So we'll talk about that tomorrow on Sunday. But yeah, so Cobus van Wijk has seemingly been dropped. He's not injured. Holland, has seemingly sort of put the nail in his coffin for his career at the Canes after he's sign for the Tigers.
I think that's probably a bit harsh. The Canes have got a lot of good outside back options. I think you could very easily make the case that before this season that Houston had a more illustrious career with the Hurricanes. Obviously, Van Veek has been scoring at a try a game in 2020, but Wes Houston's not really that much of a downgrade overall, and neither is Tia coming off the bench when he's been playing on the wing, sort of taken out of that responsibility at fullback. I wouldn't read too much into it unless we genuinely don't see him again for the rest of the tournament. I know these New Zealand teams, I think the Blues a couple of years ago, there was a player who signed for a French team and then never played again. I think that vindictiveness has been kind of moved out because it doesn't really help anybody. And you can see them wanting to give slightly more minutes to the guys that will be there next season. But yeah, we'll see.
I think that's it. Like, it's obviously sort of suspect timing, but I think you're right. There's probably not a huge amount in it. Houston hasn't been quality. He hasn't been that great this season. He hasn't got a lot of game time, but I don't think he's really done much with his game time. So it'll be a good opportunity for him to try and get on the score sheet and try and put a good performance in. Talking about like the 13 and Finn Sarso coming back in, I'm glad that they're sticking with Emanga Jensen in the starting lineup. I think he's been really good and he's been a great pairing with Laumape. Arso might be that catalyst if they need something exciting in that last sort of 10, 15 minutes to come on and make something happen, because he tries that every single time he carries, whether it works or not. But yeah, Emanga Jensen's been really good, and I'm glad to see continue.
Yeah, I'll just say something on Van Veek. I just think it's a strange one. I think it's quite strange. Like, yeah, if you want to rotate him out against maybe the Chiefs or the Highlanders, but you're playing the best team in the comp, really. You want your best winger. Like, he scored 4 tries. He's got more tries than Lamb. Goosen, as you said, to be fair to him, I'll be brutally honest, I don't think Goosen looks like he comes on, he just sort of hasn't had any impact for me. So me personally, I've read a bit more into that, and I think that potentially him leaving to the Tigers, I think it generally has an impact. That's my opinion, and that people are entitled to theirs. But I think Jason Hollands, I think he's had enough of him. I think he's going. I don't think we're going to see him again.
I'll claim. We'll see.
I think there is certainly a possibility that his time at the Hurricanes will be looked on a little bit strangely. Van Veek, that is. I remember reading an interview with, or maybe it was a video interview with him, where he talked about how much he and his family had struggled to settle in New Zealand and how hard it was being out of South Africa. So I think potentially they, as well as his performance on the field has been, I'm not sure how long he's actually been there. I think maybe he's not. Yeah, maybe he's not integrated quite as well with the squad and the environment down there as you might expect. But who knows? We genuinely have no idea. We're on the other side of the world. Yeah,
as I say, like obviously we won't go too much more into it because I want to pick that up on Leicester. But good, as I say, from a personal point for Van Veek, he's worked really hard. He was at the Stormers. He's been at the Sharks. He's been sort of moved around Super Rugby. He's had a go in the Hurricanes. That's where he's really shone. And it's a great pickup for Leicester. But we'll talk more about their signings as they've made. As I said, they've made 6 signings this week. So we'll talk about that more on Sunday. But just let's go into predictions then, or any key battles. How you see it?
Another pretty key sort of matchup in the back row. You'd sort of say on the base of the names alone that the Hurricanes did look better. Obviously, Surveyor's one of the, maybe even the best back row in the world, and Carriffy and Princep have been having really good tournaments, whereas Sanders and Christie Sanders is less young, but Christie's not exceptionally experienced. Fetu Douglas is obviously a very, very good player, not quite as flashy as Surveyor. So I think the sort of Crusaders missing the really elite talents that they have at flanker, they might struggle a bit there, but at the same time they're not bad players. They'll be easily good enough to put a fight up.
Just on Surveyor very quickly, it was a really good interview with him this week, and he was like, I don't care where I play as long as I'm playing 6, 7 or 8. He's not fussy, which is really good. That's exactly what you want. As I say, he's one of the best back row players in the world, and he's so versatile in there that you could put him anywhere. Interesting as well, they're talking about, and again, we'll probably leave this for when Super Rugby Aotearoa is finished, and I wanted to do a podcast on where we see sort of Southern Hemisphere rugby going, and we'll probably propose our ideas of maybe what they could do, and because I've been thinking about that. But there's continuing talks of bringing in a Pacific Islanders team into maybe a trans-Tasman competition, and Ardi Sarvea has come out and said he'd be really keen to sign for them if they did do that, which is fantastic. So that's certainly one to watch. Tricky, any key battles and then predictions maybe from you?
I think there's a couple in, for me, obviously looking more at that back line. There's a couple in there just to briefly mention the likes of Bridge versus Lamb, but more so Will Jordan, Geordie Barrett, like the Jordies, the battle of the Jordies, we'll call that. That would be quite a tasty one. Jordy Barrett's been on really hot form for the Canes, and it's been that catalyst to get them those wins since he's been back. And obviously we know how good Jordan's been, probably the player of the tournament from us so far. Really exciting. So it'd be good to see them two go together. But then also the 13s, the young 15s, Umanga Jensen and Beaudie Payet will be quite a good matchup, I think, as well. Two that we haven't seen loads of just yet, but have seen some really good touches. So yeah, it should be exciting.
Yeah, I was just quickly going to say, is this the first time we've seen Reece, Bridge, Jordan playing together for a couple of weeks now?
Yeah, they might. Did they play in? I feel like they played in round one. I feel like we saw them in the against the Canes last time out, and they tore them up. Yeah,
that's just such a weapon for any team.
Yeah.
I think really on the back of that alone, you'd have to expect the Crusaders will score more points in this game. They might not look the most convincing for 80 minutes, but I expect they'll probably score more points than the Hurricanes will.
So you're saying Crusaders, but then how many, Harry? How many do you want to give us a number?
Not really, because it all depends on that last 20-minute kick. I really wouldn't be surprised if it was more or less level by the time that first round of substitutions happens in 55, 60 minutes. The Hurricanes have power on the bench to score points as well, so it could be in the 30s, sort of 30 to 40 each. Could be a big one.
Yeah. They've every single match. The Crusaders have been quite close until that, as you say, that second half kick. So I reckon the same thing will happen again. If the Canes play like they have been, they played really well against the Blues, and Blues have been really the only team that we thought would challenge the Crusaders. So I think it'll be tight until that last 10 minutes, and we'll just have to see what the Crusaders do.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Crusaders are going to win. I think they'll win probably by 10. I think they'll kick on in the last 60 minutes. There's namely a better back three than Reece, Jordan and Bridge is ridiculous. I think Jack Goodhue's going to be defensively key. Like Laumape, as I said, ran 160 metres last week. And admittedly, he's up against Harry Plummer, who is not the traditional 12 anyway. Still worked him well, but Goodhue's going to hit him. Like he will make tackles on him. And obviously you've got Mo'unga's is not lazy in defence either. So you've got to think that they might. Lamape's got to work maybe a little bit harder as well. And obviously, if Mo'unga Jensen runs those lines again, they'll stay in it. The Hurricanes are a really good side. They're 3 from 3 at the moment, but the Crusaders are the juggernaut, and they'll continue to win. And they're in Christchurch, so Crusaders by 10 for me. Let's move on to the next one. So on Sunday, we've got the Blues versus the Chiefs. Last time out, the Blues comfortably won again, 24-12. Team news for the Blues is that Gerard Cowley-Tuiti starts at lock with Josh Goodhue moving to the bench. So that's seen to be rotation rather than injury for Goodhue, as he's played a lot of rugby in the second row. Caleb Clark is back with TJ Fiani coming in at centre for Nawara and Plummer, respectively. Gibson comes in on the flank for Aaron Carroll. Hoskins Tutu's knee injury means that he's still out, with Akira Ioane continuing at 8. Eklund continues at hooker, with James Parsons still out with concussion. And then Big Carl's back on the bench, with Sam Knock returning from injury, also on the bench. And obviously for the first time in this competition, when the announcement came today, was you've got Nawara is a slash with a Tara Black. So a Tara Black said they're going to play if he manages to get through the contact session. Otherwise, Nawara will get the spot on the bench. Matt Duffy moves to fullback. And the big news of the week, Beauden Barrett's at 10. Let's start with that.
Yeah, we thought it might happen, didn't we, when we saw that Black had to come off last week, and we discussed it last Sunday on the pod. I think it's a positive move. Clearly, he's not been in great form playing at fullback, and clearly that's not his preferred position. So it'll be really important to see how he gets on at 10. It could really be that fire that ignites Fayani, Ioane, Caleb Clark to lay out outside of him against the Chiefs team that's struggling. So if that fire is in the way that we're used to seeing for Bone Barrett in the All Blacks, could really be quite a big scoreline against that Chiefs backline that isn't really firing at the moment.
Yeah, I agree. I think you do all sort of end up with that Blues backline lacking a second recognised really great playmaker. I know Fayani and Ioane are both very effective creative players, but you haven't got that option out the back to make that wider pass to get the ball to the wingers on first phase off a line or a wide scrum, which pretty much every other team in this competition relies on that as an option, and it's been pretty key for the Blues getting the ball wide when their wingers are so good. So I expect that's why Fayani has come back into, one of the reasons why Fayani's come back into the starting team, because he's as much as Plummer is a sort of converted 10 / a more versatile player, Fayani is probably overall the better player, and certainly more recognised proper Super Rugby level 12. So hopefully that will make up for anything they lose by bringing Duffy in. But that being said, Duffy is a very, very solid player. There are a few players who make as few mistakes as him. He's very, very reliable. He's not the most flashy 15 that you'll see. Obviously, Damien McKenzie opposite him this week is a lot flashier, but we've seen McKenzie struggle when teams put him under pressure in the last few weeks. And Duffy doesn't really have that in his game. He's very reliable, does everything about playing 15 at a 6, 7 out of 10 every single week. Never really has a bad game. So a fantastic option for the Blues to rotate in for Black. Just quickly on the back row and second row changes for the Blues. Cowley Tuioti, that rare poacher second row. He got on the end of basically the Blues try of the season earlier in the year, and sort of had the try assigned to him with the backs having done all the work, taking the ball from about 10, 15 metres out. But genuinely a very fast player for a second row, good line-out option. Not really much of a downgrade from Goodhue. I think they're just giving Goodhue a rest. But it does mean they've got quite a lot of power coming off the bench. And yeah, similarly with Gibson starting at 6 and Lambourne on the bench in the 20 jersey, that rotation of Gibson, Lambourne and Aaron Carroll, they've got 3 really, really tough 6s there who would do well in any team in the world, any professional team in the world. They'd be key members of the squad. So it's really great for the Blues that they've got all 3 of them. And it gives Dalton Papali'i a bit more license to have a bit of fun, which is always good to see.
Yeah, Lambourne's just on Lambourne. He's looked really, really excited when he's come off the bench. Shame that he's not been given a start, but he's looked good when he's come off the bench, and especially with a guy that's maybe not starting for the Blues, he'd be an excellent pickup for someone in the Northern Hemisphere in the Premiership. I think, but he's probably happy in New Zealand. But he's one of those guys that you on the fringe of the Blues who'd probably slot nicely into any Premiership backline. On the Chiefs then, on the back row as well, a stalwart of New Zealand rugby, an absolute legend, is Adam Thompson. Thompson is getting his 100th cap for Super Rugby, so massive round of applause for him. He's been an absolute legend, predominantly playing for the Highlanders, but absolutely brilliant player for New Zealand and Super Rugby. So well done to him. A couple of changes in the front forwards for the Chiefs is Ruben O'Neill comes in at loose head. Aidan Ross is out with a calf strain. With 20-year-old Ollie Norris coming into the 23 with replacement. Letitia Milo-Harris, who's a 23-year-old Taranaki scrum half, who had an okay-ish mitre 10. Nothing really to write home about, but just looks like quite a good, young, solid 9. Just key matchups. Caleb Trask continues at 10, maybe with Beaudie Barrett at 10. You might want it. Maybe Gatland might wanted to have gone with the experience of Aaron Cruden. But as I say, yeah, relatively unchanged for the Chiefs.
Just briefly, sorry, going back to Tony Lamborn, not Australian, American international.
Oh.
23 appearances, 8 tries. Born in New Zealand, but qualifies for Australia through one of his parents, I think. America, rather, through one of his parents.
Good fun fact of the pod.
Yeah. In terms of the matchups, though, I think, again, the back rows of these two teams, they've had good days, they've had less good days. Agree that Barrett against Trask there's certainly a level of quality that Barrett brings that Trask sometimes struggles with. But you'd expect Mackenzie to be taking increasing amounts of the creative burden. Trask has had a couple of good games. Alomalo again back in for the Chiefs. I think it's the second or third consecutive start. He had some good moments last week, so you'd expect that he'll be trying to get on the ball a bit more often. I think this could be quite a tight game, even if it is at Eden Park.
What are you gonna watch? What's your score prediction?
Blues by 5.
Yeah.
But I don't think the Blues will get the try bonus point. I think the Chiefs' defense has been improving.
Tricky.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting one. It's two teams that will feel that they really, really need to win this. Chiefs obviously need to. They've been struggling with the win. They've been getting better, and then they had that comeback against the Highlanders last week to lose it in dramatic style. But they're really going to be hurting and wanting that win. Blues similarly have lost recently and would have bitterly wanted to beat the Canes. Haven't managed to, so they're going to want to get back on to winning ways at home with Beaudie Barrett moving to 10. So two teams that will really want to get that win that have been faltering recently. I think one of two things can happen in terms of the Blues. They could either continue on this run that they're going and not quite get out of the blocks and suffer a loss or a very close game, or they could kind of kick back into action with the likes of Beaudie Barrett at 10 and Fayani back in, and they could pick up where they left off a few weeks ago. So it'd be interesting to see what happens. But I think it probably will be the Blues by around about 5.
Yeah, I think the Chiefs played really good rugby for 40 minutes. If they can replicate that 40 minutes against the Highlanders, they might get a result. But the worry thing is that they've got. I think they're a team now that are playing not with a lot of confidence. My key matchup, just very quickly, is Dalton Papali'i and Sam Cane. Like, there's talk in the week of, as I say, we talked on Sunday about, is Sam Cane the inform 7? He's definitely not. Where he's up against the guy who's the best 7 in New Zealand at the moment. So it's a massive opportunity for Papali'i to sort of go, Foster, you need to pick me. So Sam Cane has to be the dominant player for the Chiefs in this game. We need to be talking on Sunday that Sam Cane was player of the week kind of thing, rather than we've not really mentioned him in that big light. So he needs to have a huge game. But I'll go Blues and I'll go by 7. I think they'll have enough in him. But I agree, I don't think they necessarily will get the try bonus point. But as I say, the Blues will take it. I think they've got a stronger team, and the Chiefs still haven't won. That obviously the sucker punch of losing to the Highlanders by how much they came back will have hurt them. But yeah. So that's Super Rugby Aotearoa. We'll quickly just run through Super Rugby AU. So the Waratahs and the Rebels are currently playing right now. I'm not going to tell the score because I'm going to go and watch it up in a minute. One key player to pick out from the Rebels, if you've not seen the sort of thing, is that Trevor Hosea has come in for Mark Stolberg. He is a highly regarded, sort of the next Will Skelton in the second row. He's a big lad. He went to BCC, so Brisbane Boys College. If you've seen that on Rugby Pass, they've done the latest rugby season on that, so it's worth a watch. They're obviously quite a renowned Australian school. So yeah, he's a very exciting player in that. And Marika Corumbetti's going to win his 50th cap today as well. So we'll see how that goes on in a moment. We'll go down the line. I think the Tars are going to win, as the Rebels can score tries. But yeah, their defence is going to be an issue. Force Brumbies. Thrush is going to come in. Thrush has taken over the captaincy from Ian Pryor, who's injured. Nick Frisby replaces him, who is the Australian international that's been at Glasgow the last 2 years, formerly of the Reds, 6 Super Rugby caps, so he brings a lot of experience. Henry Tafia comes in as well, replaces Nick Just at 12 for the Force. He's a Samoan international player at the World Cup. So there you've got Richard Kahui. He's coming on the bench. We talked about him last week as a signing, so he needs to have a very big impact. And the young prop, Tom Sherman, is also brought on the bench for the Force. And then the Brumbies, Bailey Cusack comes in at 10 for the injured Noah Loaseo. Scott Seo gets his first start, as I think James Slipper's slight injury with Nick Frost will make his debut in the second row. Simon Cater, who's played for the Warriors in Super League, not Super League, sorry, in the NRL, was very good. He's coming onto the bench as Andy Moorhead. It's not onto the bench, sorry. Cater's starting with Andy Moorhead coming onto the bench. He's highly regarded and someone to definitely watch out for.
Quickly on Cater, he is a lot of fun to watch, and would not be surprised if he popped up somewhere in the Northern Hemisphere. He's the classic, turns up at some French club as their star player and scores 10 tries a season. He's a really serious
operator.
Big guy, runs fast, runs in a dead straight line. People get out of the way of their own accord. It's very exciting to watch.
On that, Brumbies to continue their win and go top with the Reds not playing this week.
Yeah, I know the Force, their line-out's been pretty effective actually, which will go some way to neutralising the Brumbies' number one threat, and not having Lolaseo will make it slightly harder for their back line to really get going. But generally, we found, sort of as expected, Force put up a really, really impressive fight every game and then lose eventually. So wouldn't be surprised if that was the case again, especially with the Brumbies having quite a strong bench this week.
Tricky?
Yeah, I think the Force is still one of those teams that are just getting back into rugby, really. A few kind of older names, a few quite fresh faces. The Brumbies still have some, the likes of being able to bring on Scott Seo when James Slipper is injured. Having the luxury of that sort of swap means that you're probably going to be the team that's likely to come out with a win. So it'll be interesting to see how Bailey Quinzel, however you say his name, gets on at fly half in for Lolaseo, who's been playing so well, and just see how they get on. But it would probably be a Brumbies win, I think, maybe by 7-10.
Yeah, I would say that as well. The Brumbies are like the Crusaders are in Super Rugby Aotearoa, like the machine. They're the team to beat, really. They've got a sort of very strong line out. The Force actually have been a lot more competitive, and I think we've sort of maybe undone of how I'm being actually very surprised by how competitive they have been. It's now going to get them. They've got to be competitive for 80 minutes. Nick Frisby's a massive inclusion for them. Like Ian Pryor's a quality player. He won Super Rugby actually with the Reds. He was sort of their second and third choice behind Will Genia back in 2012 or whenever that was. So he's been around. So to replace experience with experience is really good. He's obviously against Joe Powell, who's talked about sort of as the next 9 with Tate McDermott, the Australian 9. So the opportunity for Joe Powell to sort of show what he can do against a really experienced guy. But yeah, the Brumbies probably by 15 for me. The Force will be in the game for about 60 minutes as they have been, but the power that the Brumbies have got will be good. But it'd be nice to see Richard Kahui come off the bench. That's the experience they need as well. He can probably still do a job at 35. He's a classic Kiwi, so I'm sure he'll be absolutely fine. That concludes really our preview podcast of this weekend's games. We'll see you on Saturday. We'll see you on Sunday as we discuss the weekend's games and predict our Lions halfback combination. You can follow us on social media on Instagram at Ruck and Mall Rugby, and on Twitter we are Ruck_and_Mall to stay up with the latest rugby developments and with the pod. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for getting in interactions on social media, and we'll see you on Sunday.
On Sunday.